The autumn rain painted Seattle's downtown neon-lit streets with shimmering reflections, but the shattered glass, scattered across the Lucky Dragon Diner's floor, told a different story. Three men wearing expensive suits, their gold rings flashing. Like brass knuckles in the fluorescent light, cornered a slender waitress behind her own counter, their leader's face twisted in a sneer that carried more menace than the knife glinting in his hand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow we've got something extra special for you. Last chance, sweetheart, the man drawled, his voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Tell us where Chen's granddaughter is hiding. Old man's gotten too comfortable thinking he can refuse our generous business proposition. The waitress, Mei Lin, kept her eyes downcast, her delicate hands trembling, as she gripped her serving tray. I just work here, she whispered. I don't know anything about Mr. Chen's family. The Lucky Dragon sat like a fading ember in the heart of Seattle's International District, its red neon sign casting a warm glow through the rain-streaked windows. The small family diner had been a neighborhood fixture for 3 generations, serving steaming bowls of hand-pulled noodles and dumplings to locals and tourists alike. Everything about it spoke of tradition and perseverance, from the slightly worn booths to the decorative paper lanterns swaying gently in the air conditioning. Inside, Mei moved with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups and delivering plates of food with quiet grace. At 28, she carried herself with a kind of understated elegance that most customers mistook for shyness. Her grandfather, watching from behind the counter where he expertly folded dumplings, knew better. They'd found each other 5 years ago when she appeared at his door, her eyes carrying shadows from a past neither of them discussed. "You're thinking awfully hard for someone just pouring coffee," old Chen observed in Mandarin, his weathered hands never pausing in their rhythmic folding. His keen eyes, sharp despite his 70 years, missed little about the young woman who'd become more than just an employee. Mei allowed herself a small smile, one that barely touched her lips. "Just wondering if we'll need extra dumplings for the dinner rush," she replied in the same language, carefully avoiding mention of the black SUVs she'd spotted circling the block earlier. Old Chen's hand stilled momentarily on the dumpling wrapper. "The Jade Phoenix clan still giving you trouble about their protection fees?" Mei's grip tightened slightly on her coffee pot. "Nothing I can't handle. They're just trying to intimidate us like they do with all the other businesses." Her voice carried a weight Chen couldn't quite place. The diner's bell chimed as Detective James Morrison entered, shaking rain from his coat. The 40-something police officer had been a regular for years, though lately his visits had grown more frequent. He claimed it was for Chen's legendary soup dumplings, but his eyes followed Mei with more than casual interest. "Usual spot?" Mei asked, already reaching for the coffee pot. "If it's not too much trouble." Morrison smiled, settling into his favorite booth. "Rough night out there. 3 businesses hit in the last week, all refusing to pay protection money to the Jade Phoenix." He watched Mei carefully as she poured his coffee. "You know, if anyone's giving you trouble, all it takes is one phone call." Mei's response was cut short by the arrival of Tommy Zhang, a young man barely out of his teens whose designer clothes screamed new money. "Hey, Miss Lin," he called out too loud in the quiet diner. "My uncle's been asking about you. Says you should reconsider his offer. Family businesses like this, they have accidents all the time. Be a shame if something happened to this nice place." The coffee pot clinched slightly harder than necessary. "Please thank your uncle for his concern," Mei replied, her voice perfectly controlled. "But as I've said before, we're doing fine on our own." Morrison's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon, but Tommy was already backing toward the door, his message delivered. After he left, Morrison leaned forward. "That's Victor Zhang's nephew. Kid's been running collections for the Jade Phoenix. Mei, if they're threatening you..." But Mei was already moving away, her steps measured and precise. "More coffee, detective? Or would you like to try our special today?" In the kitchen, old Chen watched his granddaughter through the service window. Few would notice how she moved with the balanced grace of a dancer, how her awareness extended to every corner of the diner, how she seemed to flow around obstacles rather than step around them. He remembered finding her that rainy night 5 years ago, soaked and exhausted, but carrying herself with an unmistakable dignity. She'd asked for work, offering no explanation for why a young woman with clearly formal education wanted to wait tables in a small diner. Chen had recognized something in her eyes then, a kind of disciplined fire that reminded him of his late wife. He never pressed for details about her past, about the martial arts trophies he'd found online under her name from competitions in Hong Kong, or about why such a decorated champion had disappeared from the circuit at the height of her career. Some secrets were better kept, some skills better hidden. The diner settled into its usual afternoon lull, each movement a carefully choreographed dance around unspoken truths. Mei wiped down tables with exaggerated care when customers watched. But in the kitchen alone, her movements took on a different quality, efficient, precise, almost predatory. The other waitstaff whispered sometimes about how nothing seemed to rattle her, how she could carry 6 plates at once without effort, how she always seemed to know when trouble was coming before it arrived. "Just good balance," Mei would say, her voice soft and modest. "When you've been waiting tables as long as I have." But her eyes would drift to the street outside, watching the black SUVs that passed with increasing frequency, noting faces and patterns with the attention to detail that had once earned her championships. Some knowledge was better left unspoken, some abilities better left undisplayed, at least until they became necessary. Through the rain-streaked windows, Seattle's evening rush hour was beginning, casting long shadows between the high-rises. Mei felt the familiar ache in her right shoulder, where an old competition injury sometimes flared. The rain always made it worse, but today it sang a different warning. Something was coming to Lucky Dragon, carrying echoes of a past she'd tried so hard to leave behind. Detective Morrison lingered over his coffee, carefully observing the rhythms of Lucky Dragon's early evening service. His instincts, honed by 15 years on Seattle's organized crime task force, told him something was off about Mei Lin. Her movements were too precise, her awareness too sharp for a simple waitress. Every time the door chimed, her eyes flickered, to assess the newcomer, before her gentle smile appeared. He'd spent weeks building a case against the Jade Phoenix clan, tracking their protection rackets and money laundering operations through the international district. But something about their sudden interest in Chen's modest diner didn't add up. The old man's granddaughter seemed to be at the center of it, though her background check had revealed frustratingly little. "More coffee, detective?" Mei's voice interrupted his thoughts. She stood by his table, coffee pot ready, but Morrison noticed how her body was angled slightly toward the door, her weight balanced evenly on both feet. It was the kind of stance he'd seen in the department's defensive tactics instructors. "Thanks, Mei. You know, I've been coming here for years, but I never heard old Chen mention a granddaughter before you arrived." He kept his tone casual, watching for her reaction. "Must have been quite a change, moving from Hong Kong to wait tables in Seattle." Mei's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. "Grandfather doesn't like to talk about family much. Not since grandmother passed." She poured the coffee with practiced grace. "Besides, sometimes change is good. Simple can be peaceful." Before Morrison could press further, the diner's door chimed again. 4 men entered, led by Victor Zhang himself, the Jade Phoenix clan's second-in-command. The elegant crime boss looked out of place in the humble diner, his tailored suit and leather shoes speaking of wealth and influence. His eyes locked onto Mei immediately. "Ah, Miss Lin," Zhang's voice carried across the diner, causing other customers to look up from their meals. "I trust my nephew delivered my message earlier. I thought perhaps we could discuss business more." personally. His smile never reached. His eyes. Morrison tensed, but Mei's hand brushed his shoulder as she passed, a subtle signal to stay seated. "Mr. Zhang," she bowed slightly, the perfect picture of deference. "I'm afraid we're quite busy with the dinner rush. Perhaps another time?" Zhang's smile tightened. "I insist. Your grandfather's dumplings are legendary, after all. I'd hate to see anything happen to this charming establishment." His men spread out slightly, taking positions near the exits. Other customers, sensing tension, began quietly paying their bills and leaving. Old Chen emerged from the kitchen, his face carefully neutral. "Mr. Zhang, welcome to Lucky Dragon. Please allow me to prepare you our house specialty." But Zhang waved him off, his attention fixed on Mei. "You know, Miss Lin, I've been doing some research about you. Interesting thing about Hong Kong's martial art circuit. They keep excellent records." Zhang pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. 5 consecutive championships in Wing Chun Kung Fu. They called you the ghost hand for your speed. Then suddenly, 3 years ago, you vanish. Now here you are, playing waitress in a Seattle diner. Morrison's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon, but Mei remained perfectly calm. "You seem very interested in ancient history, Mr. Zhang. Would you like to see a menu?" Zhang's facade of politeness cracked slightly. "Don't play games with me, Ghost Hand. We know who you are. More importantly, we know what you saw that night in Hong Kong. My associates there have been looking for you for a very long time." The diner had emptied now, leaving only Morrison, Chen, Mei, and Zhang's men. Rain drummed against the windows, casting shifting shadows across the tension-filled space. Mei carefully set down her coffee pot, her movements measured and deliberate. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Zhang. Whatever you think I saw, you saw my brother execute a police informant." Zhang cut in, his voice hard. "Witnessed something you shouldn't have, then disappeared before we could resolve the situation. You know how long it took us to track you here? To your grandfather's little diner?" Old Chen stepped forward, his voice carrying unexpected authority. "She is my granddaughter, Mr. Zhang. Whatever you believe she saw in Hong Kong, she is under my protection now." Zhang laughed, the sound echoing off the diner's worn tiles. "Protection? Look around you, old man. Your little waitress has brought trouble to your door. But I'm willing to be generous. Tell us what you saw that night, Miss Lin. Testify that you were mistaken, that it wasn't my brother you saw. Do this, and we'll forget about the protection fees. We'll even offer Lucky Dragon our genuine protection." Morrison had heard enough. He stood, badge in hand. "That's enough, Zhang. You're harassing these people in front of a police officer. Take your men and leave." Detective Morrison." Zhang smiled coldly. "Always dining alone. Tell me, does your department know you spend so much time watching Miss Lin? Or about your gambling debts to the Golden Palace Casino? We all have secrets, detective." Mei's voice cut through the tension, stronger now, lacking its usual gentle tone. "Please, all of you, this isn't necessary. Mr. Zhang, I've told you, I'm just a waitress, nothing more. A waitress who moves like a martial arts champion." Zhang stepped closer. "Who maintains perfect awareness of every exit, every potential weapon in the room. Who stands exactly out of striking distance even now." His hand shot out, faster than most could follow, aiming to grab her arm, but Mei wasn't there anymore. She had shifted, almost imperceptibly, just enough for Zhang's grasp to meet empty air. Her serving tray still balanced perfectly in one hand, coffee pot in the other, her stance unchanged. Only her eyes were different now, harder, more focused, carrying echoes of the fighter she'd once been. Zhang's face darkened. "Still quick, Ghost Hand, but skill won't save you this time. Or your grandfather's diner." He gestured to his men. "Perhaps we need to be more persuasive about our business proposition." "I won't ask again." Zhang's voice carried deadly promise. "Tell us exactly what you saw that night in Hong Kong." His men moved closer, hands disappearing beneath expensive jackets. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mei set her coffee pot and tray down with deliberate care, her movements measured and precise. Mr. Zhang, violence isn't necessary. This is a respected establishment. Detective Morrison is a witness. Think carefully about your next action. Morrison had drawn his weapon now, but Zhang's men had him covered from multiple angles. Police! Officer, stand down! But his commands carried little weight against four-armed gangsters. Old Chen watched from behind his counter, his weathered hands gripping the edge with white knuckles. Last chance, ghost hand, Zhang sneered. Or should I have my men start breaking things? Starting with the detective's fingers, perhaps? Or your grandfather's precious kitchen? He pulled out his own pistol, letting it catch the fluorescent light. In that moment, something shifted in Mei's demeanor. The gentle waitress facade fell away like a discarded mask, replaced by something harder, more focused. Her stance adjusted subtly, weight-centered hands relaxed at her sides. "Grandfather," she said quietly in Mandarin, "forgive me. I never wanted to bring this to your door." Old Chen's reply carried unexpected steel. "Some doors need trouble. Do knock upon them, granddaughter. Show them why the ghost hand earned its name." Zhang's gun swung toward Chen, but Mei was already moving. Her hand swept up her serving tray, sending it spinning through the air toward the nearest thug's face. In the same fluid motion, she closed the distance to Zhang, her movements carrying the practiced precision of thousands of hours of training. The coffee pot followed, scalding liquid spraying across another gangster's eyes. His scream was cut short as Mei's elbow found his throat with surgical accuracy. She flowed around his falling body, using his momentum to redirect him into his companion. "Kill her!" Zhang's command was punctuated by gunfire, but Mei had already anticipated it. She rolled behind a booth as bullets splintered wood and shattered coffee cups. Morrison took advantage of the chaos to dive for cover, returning fire and forcing one of Zhang's men to retreat toward the kitchen. What happened next seemed to defy physics. Mei emerged from her cover like smoke, her movements almost too fast to follow. She closed with the nearest gunman before he could adjust his aim, her hands moving in the distinctive short, sharp strikes of Wing Chun. The man's weapon clattered to the floor along with his unconscious body. Zhang fired again, but Mei was already inside his guard. Her palm shot up, deflecting his gun hand as her other hand delivered a precise strike to his solar plexus. The crime boss doubled over, gasping, as his pistol joined his companions on the diner floor. The remaining thugs rushed her simultaneously, but they might as well have been attacking a ghost. Mei moved between them like water, her techniques flowing seamlessly from one opponent to the next. A short kick swept one man's leg, just as her elbow caught the other's jaw. Both hit the ground hard. Morrison watched in amazement as this seemingly delicate waitress dismantled four armed men in seconds. Her movement spoke of years of intensive training, each strike calculated and efficient. This was no amateur fighter. This was a master at work. Zhang struggled to his feet, rage distorting his features. He pulled a hidden knife, slashing wildly at Mei. "You'll pay for this. The whole Jade Phoenix clan will hunt you down." But his attacks found only empty air, as Mei evaded each swing with practiced ease. "Your brother made the same threats," Mei replied calmly, deflecting another. Slash. "Right after he murdered that poor detective in Hong Kong, right before I agreed to testify against him." Her hand snapped out, catching Zhang's wrist in an iron grip. "I didn't disappear out of fear, Mr. Zhang. I disappeared to protect my grandfather." While the investigation proceeded, with a swift twist, she disarmed Zhang and sent him sprawling across a table. Coffee cups and plates crashed to the floor as the crime boss landed hard. Before he could recover, Mei had him pinned, her knee, pressing into his back with just enough pressure to make her point clear. "Detective Morrison," she called out, her voice steady despite the exertion. "I believe Mr. Zhang just confessed to having knowledge of his brother's murder of a Hong Kong police detective and attempted assault with a deadly weapon, among other charges." Morrison was already calling for backup, his eyes wide with newfound respect. "Mei, you're not just a witness, are you? You're the protected informant the Hong Kong authorities mentioned, the one who agreed to testify in the international investigation against the Jade Phoenix clan." Old Chen emerged from behind his counter, surveying the damage to his diner with remarkable calm. "My granddaughter," he said proudly, "has always believed in justice, even when it requires great sacrifice." He switched to Mandarin, addressing Mei directly. "Though perhaps next time we could have less property damage." Mei's smile finally reached her eyes. "Sorry, grandfather, I'll help clean up." She maintained her hold on Zhang, who had stopped struggling, finally recognizing the futility of his position. "And Mr. Zhang, your brother's trial begins next month, in Hong Kong. I'll be there to testify. The ghost hand doesn't run from justice, she serves it." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as rain continued to drum against the Lucky Dragon's windows. Morrison's backup was finally arriving, but the detective's mind was already racing ahead. The Jade Phoenix clan's entire operation could be exposed with Mei's testimony. Years of corruption and violence could finally be brought to light. But as he watched Mei efficiently secure Zhang with her apron strings, her movement still carrying that deadly grace even in such a mundane task, Morrison realized something else. The humble Lucky Dragon diner wasn't just a hiding place. It was a statement. Sometimes justice wore a waitress's apron, serving coffee with one hand while protecting the innocent with the other. As police cars converged on Lucky Dragon, their red and blue lights painting the rain-slicked streets in alternating colors, Detective Morrison watched Mei Lin coordinate with responding officers as naturally as she'd coordinated dinner service just hours before. She gave her statement with precise detail, her quiet voice carrying authority that made even veteran officers lean in to listen. "You've been investigating the Jade Phoenix clan this whole time," Morrison said, pieces finally falling into place. "Not just hiding from them. That's why you chose this location, why you stayed so visible." He glanced around the diner, seeing it with new eyes. The perfect observation post for their operations in the international district. Mei nodded slightly, her movement still carrying that controlled grace, even in stillness. The diner sits at the intersection of their three main territories. Every enforcer, every collector, every high-ranking member comes through here eventually. She paused, watching as Zhang and his men were led away in handcuffs. "Though I didn't expect them to connect me to Hong Kong so quickly." Old Chen emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of tea, seemingly unperturbed by the chaos of police activity in his establishment. "Perhaps because you were not as careful lately," he chided gently in Mandarin. "Training on the roof before dawn, maintaining your forms when you thought no one was watching. You saw that?" Mei's composure cracked slightly, showing genuine surprise. "I see everything in my diner," Chen replied with a slight smile. "Just as I saw you choose the table. Detective Morrison sits it specifically because it offers the best view of the street while keeping your back to a wall." He poured tea with practiced precision, though I admit I did not expect such extensive remodeling of my dining room. Morrison surveyed the damage, overturned tables, broken dishes, bullet holes in the walls. "The department will cover the repairs," he offered, "considering this is now an active crime scene in a major investigation." "And what investigation would that be, Detective?" A new voice cut through the controlled chaos. Special Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Organized Crime Division stood in the doorway, her badge already displayed. "Because the Jade Phoenix clan, who falls under federal jurisdiction." Mei's posture shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, taking a more defensive stance. Agent Chen. Hong Kong police mentioned you might appear eventually. Miss Lin. The FBI agent's tone was professional but carried an undercurrent of tension. Or should I say ghost hand? You've led us on quite a chase these past few years. Do you know how many resources we've devoted to keeping you safe, only to find you serving noodles in plain sight? Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight, old Chen interjected, calmly pouring another cup of tea. Would you care for some jasmine tea, Agent? Your flight from Washington must have been tiring. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. You knew who she really was all along, didn't you, Mr. Chen? The renowned Wing Chun master who disappeared from Hong Kong's martial arts circuit just when she was set to become a national champion. I knew she was someone who needed a home. Chen replied simply, the rest was her story to tell when she was ready. He glanced at his granddaughter with unmistakable pride. Though I admit, her skills have helped with carrying heavy deliveries. Morrison watched this exchange with growing understanding. The FBI's been running a parallel investigation this whole time. That's why my database searches on Mei kept hitting dead ends. Witness protection isn't usually this public, Agent Chen admitted, but Miss Lin insisted that disappearing completely would only delay the inevitable. She chose to hide in the open, gathering intelligence on the Jade Phoenix. Clan's American operations while we built our case in Hong Kong. Mei moved to right an overturned table, her movements economical and precise, even in this simple task. Zhang's brother made a mistake in Hong Kong, letting himself be seen executing that detective. The Jade Phoenix clan has operated with impunity for too long, thinking their money and connections make them untouchable. And now we have Victor Zhang on attempted murder charges, conspiracy, and a recorded confession about his brother's crimes, Morrison added, plus whatever evidence Mei's gathered over the past 3 years. 5 years, Mei corrected quietly. I've been watching them for 5 years. The diner's security cameras, modified with enhanced audio recording. Every conversation, every threat, every business dealing they thought was private. She reached under the counter and removed a hidden hard drive. Everything the FBI needs to dismantle their entire operation on both sides of the Pacific. Agent Chen accepted the drive with raised eyebrows. You've been playing a dangerous game, Miss Lin. If they'd discovered your true identity sooner, they would have found that the gentle waitress they dismissed was more dangerous than any enforcer they could send. Old Chen stated matter-of-factly, my granddaughter did not earn her titles through luck alone. As if to emphasize his point, one of Zhang's semi-conscious men suddenly lurched up from where the paramedics were treating him, producing a hidden blade. Before anyone could react, Mei had closed the distance, her hands moving in a fluid sequence that disarmed and disabled him without apparent effort. The man hit the floor again, this time thoroughly unconscious. Impressive, Agent Chen admitted, though perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more secure. The Jade Phoenix clan will have sent word up their chain of command by now. They'll send more than local muscle next time. Morrison stepped forward. The department can provide protection. But Mei was already shaking her head. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less than I am. She turned to old Chen, bowing deeply. Grandfather, I'm sorry for bringing this to your door, for deceiving you about who I really was. Chen's weathered hand gently touched her shoulder. You have brought honor to my door, child. The Lucky Dragon has always been more than just a diner. Your grandmother would be proud of how you've used its shelter to protect others from injustice. About that, Agent Chen interjected. Mr. Chen, your diner's location and your granddaughter's unique capabilities could be extremely useful to our ongoing operations. With proper support and official sanction, of course. Morrison caught the considering look that passed between Mei and her grandfather. The Lucky Dragon had already proven itself an ideal observation post. With federal backing and Mei's skills openly acknowledged, it could become something more. a base of operations against organized crime in the International District. The rain had finally begun to slack outside, and the first hints of dawn were lightening the eastern sky. In the distance, more sirens approached as federal backup arrived to secure the scene. Mei Lin, the ghost hand of Hong Kong, who had found her path serving justice alongside dumplings, stood in the center of her grandfather's diner, no longer hiding who and what she was. The real question was, what would she become now? The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the previous night's chaos. Lucky Dragon's windows had been temporarily boarded up, bullet holes marked with evidence tags, but old Chen insisted on opening for the breakfast rush. "A diner that closes," he declared while preparing the morning's dumplings, "loses more than just customers. It loses its soul." Mei moved through her usual morning routine, though now her awareness was openly sharp, her movements no longer concealing their trained precision. Agent Chen sat at the counter, files spread before her, while Morrison coordinated with uniformed officers stationed outside. The FBI wasn't taking any chances with their star witnesses' safety. "The Jade Phoenix clan's hierarchy is actively discussing your situation," Agent Chen reported, reviewing messages on her secure phone. "Our sources indicate they're splitting into factions. Some want to silence you immediately. Others fear drawing more federal attention." Mei poured coffee with the same fluid grace she'd used to disarm Zhang the night before. "They'll send professionals next, not local muscle, but real hunters." Her voice carried no fear, only tactical assessment. "Probably from their operations in Vancouver or San Francisco, which is why you need to come with me to a secure location," Agent Chen insisted. "We have safe houses specifically designed for high-risk witnesses." But Mei was already shaking her head, her decision evident in her posture. "Running didn't solve anything last time," she said firmly. "It only delayed the inevitable and let them continue hurting people. Besides," she gestured to the morning's first customers entering the diner, "these people, this community, they deserve protection from the Jade Phoenix clan's extortion." Old Chen emerged from the kitchen carrying fresh dumplings, his movements spry despite his age. "Perhaps, Agent Chen, you are approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of hiding my granddaughter, why not use what the Jade Phoenix clan fears most about her?" "Her testimony about the Hong Kong murder?" Morrison asked, accepting a cup of coffee. "No," Chen smiled slightly. "Her reputation. The ghost hand wasn't just a nickname. In Hong Kong's martial arts circles, my granddaughter was legendary, not just for winning championships, but for how she won them. They called her techniques invisible. You couldn't see the strikes coming until it was too late." Mei busied herself, wiping down already clean counters. "That was a lifetime ago, grandfather." "Was it?" Chen's eyes twinkled. "Tell them about your training room above the diner. About the students you've been quietly teaching self-defense to after closing hours. The daughters of shopkeepers, women who work late shifts, people the Jade Phoenix clan sees as easy targets." Agent Chen sat up straighter. "You've been training people? That wasn't in any of our reports?" "Because I wasn't training fighters," Mei replied softly. "I was teaching survival, basic techniques, awareness, how to escape bad situations. The same skills I used to survive after witnessing the murder." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "Though perhaps it's time for more advanced lessons." Morrison watched a group of young women enter the diner, their expressions brightening when they saw Mei. He recognized them as workers from nearby businesses, the ones most vulnerable to the Jade Phoenix clan's protection rackets. "You're not just gathering evidence," he realized. "You're building a community defense network, people who can protect themselves and each other." "The Jade Phoenix clan's power comes from fear," Mei confirmed, greeting her students with subtle nods. "They target those they think are weak, isolated. But strength doesn't always come from fists or weapons. Sometimes it comes from knowing you're not alone. Agent Chen was rapidly reassessing the situation. A protected witness who not only gathers intelligence, but actively works to undermine the criminal organization's power base. This could be unprecedented. Or it could paint an even bigger target on her back, Morrison warned. There's already a target on my back, Mei stated calmly. The question is, do we let them choose the battlefield, or do we make them face us where we're strongest? Old Chen set another plate of dumplings on the counter. In Wing Chun, we teach that the best defense is to turn your opponent's strength against them. The Jade Phoenix clan thinks they can isolate us, terrorize us one by one. Instead, they've given us a reason to unite. As if to emphasize his point, more people began filtering into the diner. Shop owners, restaurant workers, local residents. Many bore subtle signs of martial arts training in their movements, their awareness. All of them nodded respectfully to Mei. How many? Agent Chen asked quietly. 37 active students, Mei replied, plus another 50 who've completed basic self-defense courses. All people the Jade Phoenix clan thought they could intimidate into paying protection money. Morrison whistled softly. You've been building an army. Not an army, Mei corrected. A family, a community that protects its own. She turned to Agent Chen. You want to know why I won't hide in a safe house? Because these people trusted me to teach them how to stand up for themselves. Running now would teach them that courage isn't enough, that the only response to evil is to hide from it. Agent Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the diner fill with people who carried themselves with new confidence. Finally, she closed her files. What exactly are you proposing? Let them come, Mei said simply, but this time we face them as a community. Every shop owner who's tired of paying protection money, every worker who's faced their threats, and when they realize their intimidation no longer works, they'll have to either escalate dramatically, Morrison continued, catching her strategy, which would bring down even more law enforcement attention, or back down, Agent Chen finished. Losing face and power in the process. It's risky, but it could work. She pulled out her phone. I'll need to clear this with my superiors. We'd have to coordinate with local law enforcement, set up surveillance. Old Chen smiled, beginning preparations for another batch of dumplings. The best recipes, he said wisely, combine unexpected ingredients to create something stronger than its parts. Mei looked around the diner, at the mix of law enforcement and community members, at her students trying to hide their nervous excitement, at her grandfather's quiet pride. The ghost hand had vanished from Hong Kong's martial arts circuit to protect justice. Perhaps it was time for her to reappear in Seattle, not as a hidden weapon, but as a visible symbol of resistance against those who would prey on the vulnerable. 3 days after Zhang's arrest, Lucky Dragon had transformed. While maintaining its appearance as a humble diner, subtle changes marked its evolution into something more. Security cameras had been upgraded with federal-grade equipment, and reinforced glass replaced the broken windows. Agent Chen had established a discreet command post in the building next door, while Morrison's regular patrols had been supplemented by plainclothes officers disguised as customers. They're here, Mei announced quietly, refilling coffee cups as she tracked 3 black SUVs circling the block. Her students, scattered throughout the diner in their normal roles as customers and workers, maintained their routines while subtly shifting to alert positions. 4 men in the first vehicle, Morrison reported through his concealed radio. Professionals, by their movement patterns, not local talent. He sat at his usual booth, appearing to focus on his newspaper while observing the street. Agent Chen's voice crackled through their earpieces. Facial recognition confirms 2 known hitmen from Vancouver. The others are new players. Everyone hold positions. Let them make the first move. Old Chen continued preparing dumplings behind the counter, his movements unhurried despite the tension. His eyes met Mei's briefly, carrying decades of martial wisdom. She nodded slightly, understanding his unspoken message. Patience before action. Awareness before engagement. The diner's bell chimed as two men entered, their expensive suits failing to hide their predatory nature. They moved with the careful precision of experienced killers, scanning the space before settling into a booth. More customers filtered in behind them, regular morning customers mixed with Mei's students and undercover agents. "Coffee?" Mei approached the men, her serving tray held naturally but positioned to serve as an impromptu shield if needed. The larger man smiled without warmth. "Miss Lin, or should I say, Ghost Hand." His Cantonese carried a mainland accent. "I believe you know why we're here. The Jade Phoenix clan sends its regards." Mei poured their coffee with steady hands. "Welcome to Lucky Dragon. Today's special is Pow Pow's secret recipe dumplings, though I suspect you're not here for the menu." "Smart girl," the second man said softly. "Smart enough to know what happens to witnesses who threaten our organization. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." "I think here is fine," Mei replied, her voice carrying clearly through the diner. "After all, everything you say is being recorded, and there are federal agents within arm's reach, not to mention my students." As if on cue, several customers shifted in their seats, their movements carrying the unmistakable readiness of trained fighters. The hitmen's eyes narrowed as they reassessed the situation. "Students," the first man laughed, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "The ghost hand teaching self-defense to waitresses and shop girls. How far you've fallen from your championship days." Mei set down her coffee pot deliberately. "I haven't fallen. I've grown. In Hong Kong, I fought for trophies. Here, I fight for something more important." She gestured around the diner. "Every person here has faced your clan's threats, your demands for protection money. Each one has chosen to stop being afraid." "Brave words," the second man sneered, his hand sliding beneath his jacket. "But bravery won't stop bullets." "No." Morrison's voice cut in as he stood, badge displayed, "but federal agents might, along with a dozen cameras currently broadcasting this conversation to the FBI's Seattle field office." The hitmen tensed, but more movement caught their attention. Throughout the diner, Mei's students had risen, their stances reflecting her teaching. The shop owner from next door, the young barista from the coffee shop down the street, even the elderly florist, all showed the quiet confidence of people trained to defend themselves. "You see," Mei continued calmly, "the Jade Phoenix clan made a mistake. You thought fear was your greatest weapon, but fear brings people together, teaches them to protect each other. Every person you threatened became another student. Every business you tried to extort became another ally." Old Chen emerged from behind his counter, his presence carrying unexpected authority. "Your organization believes in power through intimidation. We believe in strength through community." Through their earpieces, Agent Chen reported more movement outside. "The other two SUVs are trying to circle around back. Our teams are in position." The first hitman stood slowly, his cold facade cracking slightly. "You think your little self-defense classes can stand against the entire Jade Phoenix clan? We have operations across the Pacific Rim, connections in every major city." "And now we have proof of all of it," Mei replied. "Everything Zhang confessed. Everything I witnessed in Hong Kong, plus 3 years of surveillance from this diner. Enough evidence to dismantle your operations piece by piece." "Unless," Agent Chen said, entering through the kitchen, "you gentlemen would like to discuss cooperation agreements. The FBI is very interested in your organization's structure." The hitmen exchanged glances, years of experience telling them when a situation had become untenable. The second man's hand emerged slowly from his jacket, empty. The ghost hand was feared in Hong Kong for a reason, Mei added softly. Not just for my fighting skills, but for my ability to turn an opponent's strength against them. You relied on isolation and fear. Instead, you created unity and resistance. Morrison, move closer, handcuffs ready. Your choice, gentlemen. Either leave Seattle and tell your bosses that their protection racket is finished here, or leave in federal custody with charges of conspiracy and attempted witness intimidation. The first hitman studied Mei for a long moment. The clan won't. Forget this betrayal. It's not betrayal to stand against injustice, Mei corrected. Your organization forgot the true meaning of honor, of protecting people rather than exploiting them. Perhaps this will help you remember. The tension in the diner stretched like a drawn bowstring, then snapped as the hitmen slowly raised their hands. Outside, the sound of police sirens indicated their backup teams were being intercepted. As Morrison began reading rights and Agent Chen coordinated with her teams, old Chen approached his granddaughter. The first victory, he said quietly, in Mandarin is often the hardest. Mei watched as her students helped restore the diner to its normal morning routine, their movements now carrying a quiet pride. Not a victory, grandfather, a beginning. The ghost hand doesn't just fight. She teaches, protects, builds something stronger than fear. The morning sun streamed through Lucky Dragon's new windows, illuminating a space that had become more than just a diner. It was a symbol now, a declaration that sometimes the strongest defense against darkness was to step into the light, surrounded by others who refused to be afraid. In the week following the confrontation at Lucky Dragon, change rippled through Seattle's international district like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Word spread quickly about how the Ghost Hand and her students had faced down the Jade Phoenix clan's enforcers. More importantly, news traveled about how a simple diner had become a symbol of resistance against organized crime. 3 more businesses refused to pay protection money yesterday, Morrison reported, settling into his usual booth with a fresh cup of coffee. The Jade Phoenix clan's local revenue is dropping fast. Mei moved through her morning routine, noting the increased customer flow. People who had once hurried past with downcast eyes now entered Lucky Dragon with purpose, some seeking meals, others inquiring about self-defense classes. They're losing more than money, she observed. They're losing their grip on fear. Agent Chen arrived with fresh intelligence, positioning herself at the counter where she could observe the street. Vancouver branch is pulling back their operations. Our sources say they're worried about increased scrutiny. But Beijing... She paused, her expression grave. They're sending someone significant. Old Chen emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. The dragonhead himself? He asked quietly. Close, Agent Chen confirmed. His daughter, Lei Jiang. She's been running their West Coast operations from San Francisco, and she has history with our ghost hand here. Mei's movement stilled momentarily, though her voice remained steady. Lei was my closest competitor in Hong Kong. We trained at the same school, fought in the same tournaments, until she chose a different path. More than that, old Chen added, his eyes knowing. She was your friend, before her father's influence turned her toward darker pursuits. The morning sun cast long shadows through Lucky Dragon's windows as Mei absorbed this news. Lei Jiang had been more than a friend. She had been like a sister, both of them rising through Hong Kong's martial arts ranks together. Their final match, just before Mei witnessed the murder that changed everything, had been legendary in circuit circles. She'll come herself, Mei said with certainty. Lei always believed in handling important matters personally. She turned to Agent Chen. Your surveillance teams won't spot her. She's too good. Morrison frowned. You think she'll try something in broad daylight, after what happened to their hitmen? Lei doesn't think like a common enforcer, Mei explained, refilling coffee cups with mechanical precision. She's a strategist. She'll want to understand how her father's organization lost control here, and she hesitated. She'll want to know why I chose this path. As if summoned by her words, the diner's door chimed. A woman entered alone, her elegant business suit and poised demeanor marking her as out of place in the humble establishment. Lei, Zhang had changed little in 5 years, still carrying herself with the same deadly grace that had made her feared in competition circles. The diner's regular customers continued their meals, though Mei's students subtly shifted positions, ready to respond if needed. Morrison's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon, but Mei gave him a slight shake of her head. Jie, Lei said softly, using the familiar term for elder sister they had once shared. You've been busy. Mei met her former friend's gaze steadily. Lei, would you like coffee or perhaps tea? Grandfather still makes it the traditional way. So formal. Lei smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After everything we shared? After how you disappeared? She settled onto a counter stool with fluid grace. Green tea, please. It seems we have much to discuss. Old Chen began preparing tea with deliberate care as Mei positioned herself behind the counter. The two women studied each other, years of shared history and divergent choices hanging between them. Your father's organization is losing its hold here, Mei said finally, placing a teacup before Lei. The community is no longer afraid. Because of you, Lei observed, lifting the cup with perfect form. The ghost hand, teaching waitresses and shopkeepers to defend themselves. I admit when I first heard I didn't believe it. You were destined for greater things than this humble existence. Was I? Mei's voice carried no challenge, only genuine question. We both trained to protect others, Lei, to uphold traditions of honor and justice. When did that change for you? Lei's composure cracked slightly. You know when it changed. After my father showed me the truth about power, about how the world really works. The same truth I tried to share with you before. She trailed off. Before I witnessed your uncle murder that detective? Mei finished quietly. Before I chose to testify? You could have joined us. Lei's voice carried old pain. Father offered you a place in the organization. Together, we could have been unstoppable. Like we were as students. Mei smiled sadly. Remember Master Wong's teachings about strength? Through unity. About using our skills to protect the weak. The weak protect themselves or perish, Lei replied, but there was uncertainty in her tone. Look around you. Mei gestured to the diner's customers, the shopkeepers, the students, the community members who had found courage together. They are protecting themselves, not through fear or violence, but through unity, through standing together against those who would prey on them. Lei set down her teacup, studying the people around her with new eyes. Father sent me to deal with this situation, to remind everyone why the Jade Phoenix clan demands respect. Respect earned through fear isn't respect at all, old Chen interjected. Gently, your father's path leads only to endless cycles of violence and retribution. And what alternative do you offer? Lei challenged, though her voice wavered slightly. Teaching basic self-defense in a diner? How does that change anything? It changes everything, Mei replied softly. Every person who chooses not to be afraid, every community that stands together, they become something your father's organization can't fight, because you can't intimidate people who have found their own strength. The morning light streamed through Lucky Dragon's windows, illuminating the two women who had once been like sisters, now standing on opposite sides of a moral divide. But in Lei's eyes, Mei saw something she hadn't expected. Longing. Longing for the simplicity they had once shared, for a path guided by honor rather than power. Join us, Mei offered quietly. Help us build something better than fear. You remember the way, Lei. You haven't forgotten, just lost sight of it for a while. Lei Jiang, daughter of the Dragonhead, trained killer and enforcer, looked around. The humble diner that had become a beacon of resistance. For a moment, her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the student of honor she had once been. The choice that lay before her would change more than just her own fate. It would determine whether the International District's newfound courage would spark a larger transformation, or whether the shadows of fear would descend once more. Lei's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her teacup again, an almost imperceptible shake that only someone who knew her as well as Mei would notice. "You make it sound so simple," she said softly. "Just choose a different path. Just remember who we were. But you know my father. You know what happens to those who betray the clan." Mei glanced at Agent Chen, who had maintained a respectful distance during their exchange. "The FBI can protect you, Lei, just like they protected me while I built something new here." "Protected you?" Lei's laugh carried no humor. "Is that what you call serving noodles and teaching basic strikes to shopkeepers? The ghost hand, reduced to hiding in plain sight?" "Not hiding," old Chen corrected, his voice gentle but firm. "Growing. Sometimes a seed must be planted in humble soil to grow into something strong." Lei stood abruptly, her movement carrying the liquid grace of years of training. "Pretty metaphors won't change reality. My father has connections in every major city on the Pacific Rim. His influence reaches into police departments, government offices, even federal agencies. You think your little community of resistors can stand against that?" "We already are," Morrison interjected, approaching carefully. "Every business that refuses to pay protection money, every piece of evidence we gather, every person who chooses to stand with us, it all adds up. The Jade Phoenix clan isn't invincible, Lei. You know that better than anyone." A shadow crossed Lei's face. "What are you implying, detective?" "You've seen the corruption up close," Mei said quietly. "Watched it consume your family, twist everything our masters taught us about honor and protection into something dark. That's why you're here alone, isn't it? To see for yourself if there's another way." The diner had grown quiet. Its regular customers and Mei's students watching the exchange with held breath. Lei's hand drifted to her sleeve, where Mei knew she kept a concealed blade. "You always could read me too well, Gag. But you don't understand everything. My father, he's planning something big. The clan's operations here in Vancouver, in San Francisco, they're just the surface." Agent Chen stepped forward. "Tell us, Lei. Help us stop whatever he's planning before more people get hurt." "Tell you?" Lei's voice cracked slightly. "Like Mei told you about my uncle. Do you know what happened after she disappeared? Father's rage, his paranoia, the purges within our own organization. People disappeared, loyal members, their families, anyone he thought might betray us next." Mei felt the weight of guilt press against her chest. "I never wanted that. I just couldn't stay silent about an innocent man's murder." "No," Lei agreed, something shifting in her expression. "You couldn't, because despite everything you remained. True to what Master Wong taught us about the warrior's duty to protect truth and justice." She turned to face the diner's occupants. "Look at them, these people you're teaching. They're not warriors, not fighters. They're ordinary people just trying to live their lives. That's exactly why they deserve protection," Mei replied. "The same protection we swore to provide when we first began our training. Remember the oath, Lei? Strength not for oneself, but for those who cannot defend themselves." Lei's hand dropped from her sleeve. "Father's planning to expand. Not just protection rackets and smuggling anymore. He's making deals with larger organizations, international syndicates. The Jade Phoenix clan is just the beginning." Agent Chen pulled out her phone, ready to take notes. "We'll need details, names, dates, locations. If I help you, Lei's voice carried steel beneath its softness. I want guarantees. Not just protection for myself, but for others in the organization who might want out. Young members who joined because they felt they had no choice. Families caught in father's web. Like you were caught, old Chen asked gently. Lei's composure finally cracked. I was 12 when he started grooming me to take over. 12 when he began teaching me that power was the only truth that mattered. But at night, I would practice the forms Master Wong taught us, remember the lessons about honor and justice. Even as I rose through the clan's ranks, part of me never forgot. Mei moved around the counter, approaching her old friend with measured steps. Then help us remember together. Help us show others there's a way out of the darkness. It won't be easy, Morrison warned. The clan won't just let their heir apparent walk away. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy, old Chen observed, beginning to prepare a fresh pot of tea. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Lei looked around the diner again, seeing it with new eyes. The customers who had found courage to stand against intimidation, the students learning to protect themselves and others, the community that had grown from seeds of resistance Mei had carefully planted. The ghost hand teaches more than just fighting techniques here, doesn't she? Lei asked softly. Mei smiled. She teaches hope, the kind we used to believe in before your father's influence darkened your path. Stay, Lei. Help us build something better than fear. The morning sun had climbed higher, its light transforming Lucky Dragon's humble interior into something almost sacred, a space where choices could reshape destinies, where old wounds might finally begin to heal. Lei Zhang, heir to the Jade. Phoenix Clan's criminal empire stood at a crossroads. Behind her lay a path of power built on fear and corruption. Before her, a chance to remember who she had been before darkness claimed her, to help others find their way back to the light. She looked at Mei, her old friend, her one-time sister in training, who had never lost sight of their true purpose. Then she reached into her jacket, slowly, so as not to alarm Morrison or Agent Chen, and withdrew a USB drive. Everything I know about Father's operations, she said quietly. His contacts, his plans, the evidence I've been gathering since you disappeared, because deep down I always knew this day would come, the day when I'd have to choose between power and honor. The choice that hung in Lucky Dragon's morning air would ripple far beyond Seattle's International District. It would reach across the Pacific into the heart of the Jade Phoenix Clan's empire, offering others trapped in darkness a glimpse of another way. The ghost hand had vanished from Hong Kong to protect justice. Now perhaps it was time for her to teach others how to step into the light. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through Lucky Dragon's windows as Agent Chen reviewed the contents of Lei's USB drive. Her eyes widened with each new revelation. This is extensive, she said finally. Financial records, shipping manifests, correspondence with international syndicates. Lei, you've been planning this for years. Since the night Mei disappeared, Lei confirmed, her hands wrapped around a fresh cup of tea. Father thought he was teaching me to take over his empire. Instead, he taught me how to document his crimes. Mei watched her friend, her sister in all but blood, with a mixture of pride and concern. The clan will know by now that you've come here. They'll guess what you've done. They're already moving, Morrison reported, checking his phone. Our surveillance team spotted increased activity around known Jade Phoenix properties. They're shutting down operations, destroying evidence. Let them. Lei's voice carried new strength. What's on that drive is backed up on secure servers. More importantly, it's not just about evidence anymore. It's about showing others in the organization that there's a way out. Old Chen emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of dumplings. Every journey of liberation, he said wisely, begins with one person brave enough to take the first step. The diner had entered its quiet afternoon lull, but Mei's students remained scattered throughout, maintaining their protective watch. News of Lei's defection would bring more than just legal consequences. It would bring her father's wrath. "We should move you to a safe house," Agent Chen suggested, but Lei shook her head. "No more hiding," she said, echoing Mei's words from days before. "Father's influence comes from people believing he's invincible, that resistance is futile. My public defection here in this diner that's become a symbol of resistance, it sends a message." Morrison frowned. "A message that could get you killed. Or a message that could save lives," Mei countered, understanding Lei's strategy. How many others in the organization are like Lei was, trapped by fear and obligation, looking for a way out? As if in answer to her question, the diner's door chimed. A young man entered, barely out of his teens, wearing the expensive clothes that marked Jade Phoenix enforcers. But his hands trembled slightly, and his eyes carried a desperate hope. "Miss Zhang," he bowed slightly to Lei, we heard you were here, that you're standing against the clan." Lei studied him carefully. "Michael Chen, you're one of our new recruits. Father had high hopes for you." The young man's composure cracked. "I didn't know what I was joining. They said it was about protecting our community, preserving our culture, but the things they're making us do." "How many others feel the same way?" Mei asked gently. "Many," Michael admitted, "especially the younger ones, but we're afraid. The clan, they own us, our families, our futures." Lei stood, her movement carrying the authority of her years as the clan's heir. "Not anymore. Look around you. This diner, these people, they've proven the clan isn't invincible, that there's strength in standing together." More people were entering now, not just customers or students, but faces Lei recognized from the clan's operations. Young men and women who had been drawn in by promises of power and protection, only to find themselves trapped in a web of violence and corruption. "It's starting," old Chen observed quietly. "The great wheel turns. What was hidden comes to light." Agent Chen was already on her phone, coordinating with her teams. "We'll need to set up a proper witness protection program. Create new identities." "No," Lei interrupted firmly. "No more hiding in shadows. These people deserve the chance to reclaim their lives openly, to help repair the damage the clan has done to their community." Mei moved to stand beside her friend, their shoulders touching in the way they used to before competitions. "It won't be easy. The clan will see this as the ultimate betrayal." "Good," Lei's voice carried steel. "Let them come. Let them see what happens when people stop being afraid, when they remember the true meaning of honor and protection." Michael Chen stepped forward, his earlier trembling replaced by determination. There are others waiting to see what happens here, waiting to see if it's really possible to break free. Morrison's phone buzzed with urgent alerts. Multiple reports coming in. Jade Phoenix properties across the city are being abandoned. Some of their enforcers are turning themselves into police, asking for protection. "Not just protection," Lei corrected. "Redemption. A chance to make things right." She turned to Mei. "You built something remarkable here, Jie. Not just a refuge, but a beacon of hope." Old Chen began preparing more tea with methodical precision. "When I took Mei in," he said thoughtfully, "I thought I was providing shelter to one person, seeking a new path. Instead, she has shown all of us the way forward." The afternoon light filled Lucky Dragon with warm radiance, illuminating a space that had become more than just a diner or a training ground. It had become a symbol of transformation, a place where those trapped in darkness could find their way back to the light. Lei looked at the growing gathering, federal agents and local, police, former enforcers seeking redemption, community members who had found their courage. The path ahead would be dangerous. Her father's rage would shake the foundations of everything they were building. But for the first time in years, she felt truly free. The ghost hand was feared in Hong Kong, she said softly, because she could. Turn an opponent's strength against them. My father built his empire on fear and isolation. Now that same fear is causing it to crumble as people choose unity over intimidation. Me smiled, hearing echoes of their old master's teachings in Lei's words. Remember what Master Wong used to say? The strongest chain can be broken by its weakest link, but a web of silk threads woven together can catch a dragon. Outside, more people were approaching the diner. Former clan members seeking a new path, community members offering support, even journalists drawn by rumors of the Jade Phoenix heir's defection. The story of Lucky Dragon's resistance was spreading, carried on whispers of hope through Seattle's shadows. The ghost hand had emerged from hiding not to fight but to teach, to show others that true strength came not from fear or violence, but from the courage to stand together against darkness. And now, with Lei by her side once more, that teaching would reach even further, offering redemption to those who thought themselves beyond saving. The next morning dawned with an eerie quiet over Seattle's International District. Lucky Dragon had remained open through the night, transformed into an impromptu sanctuary for former Jade Phoenix members seeking refuge. Agent Chen had established a processing center in the building next door, while Morrison coordinated with local police to protect those who had chosen to break free from the clan. Latest count, Lei reported, helping Mei serve breakfast to the gathered crowd. 43 members have officially defected, including 3 high-ranking lieutenants, who've agreed to testify about father's operations. Mei watched her friend move through the diner with renewed purpose. The previous day's decision had lifted a weight from Lei's shoulders, returning some of the grace that had made her such a formidable competitor in their youth. And your father. Silent, Lei's voice carried concern. No moves against defectors, no attempts to destroy evidence. He's planning something. Old Chen emerged from the kitchen, where he'd been cooking non-stop to feed their growing congregation of seekers and protectors. A dragon cornered is most dangerous just before it strikes. As if summoned by his words, the diner's door chimed. A man entered alone, his expensive suit and commanding presence drawing all eyes. David Zhang, head of the Jade Phoenix clan, carried himself with the same lethal grace as his daughter, Lei. His voice was soft but carried throughout the suddenly silent diner. I raised you to be stronger than this. Lei straightened, unconsciously shifting into a defensive stance. No, father. You raised me to be afraid. There's a difference. Zhang's eyes swept the room, noting the former clan members who refused to meet his gaze, the federal agents reaching for weapons, Mei's students moving to protective positions. Look at them, he said with quiet disdain. Weak people seeking shelter behind the ghost hand's reputation. Is this what you've chosen, to hide among cowards? They're not hiding. Mei stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying authority. They're choosing a different path, the same path Lei has chosen. Ah, the prodigal sister returns. Zhang's smile didn't reach his eyes. You disappeared from Hong Kong thinking you could escape us, only to build this collection of strays and traitors. Built something stronger than your empire of fear, Lei countered. These people aren't bound by intimidation or violence. They're united by choice, by the desire to protect rather than destroy. Zhang moved further into the diner, his steps measured and precise. Mei recognized the walk of a trained fighter assessing threats and positions. Protection? He laughed softly. Look around you, daughter. What protection can this humble diner offer against what's coming? We know about your plans. Agent Chen stepped forward, badge displayed. The international connections, the expansion strategies. Lei documented everything. Did she? Zhang seemed genuinely amused. And did she tell you about our friends in federal law enforcement? About the judges and politicians who ensure our operations remain undisturbed? All documented, Lei confirmed, along with the offshore accounts used to pay them. Everything, Father, your entire network exposed. For the first time, Zhang's composed facade cracked slightly. You would destroy everything I built? Everything I prepared for you to inherit? No, Lei's voice softened. I'm trying to save something more important. The honor you taught me about when I was young, before power corrupted your path. The true meaning of protection that Master Wong showed us. Honor? Zhang spat the word. Honor doesn't build empires. Honor doesn't keep our people safe in a world that would crush them. Everything I did to make us strong. Mei moved to stand beside Lei, their shoulders touching as they had in countless tournaments. Strength through fear isn't strength at all. It's just another form of weakness. Pretty philosophy. Zhang's hand moved slightly, and suddenly he held a gun. Let's see how it stands against reality. But before he could aim, something extraordinary happened. Throughout the diner, people began to stand. Not just Mei's trained students or federal agents, but former clan members. The young enforcer Michael Chen, the accountant who had handled illegal transactions, the warehouse workers who had moved smuggled goods, all rose as one. Stop, Father. Lei's voice carried new authority. Look around you. Every person here has chosen to break free from fear. Your weapon can't change that choice. My own daughter. Zhang's gun wavered slightly, turning my people against me. No. Lei stepped forward, her movements carrying the same deadly grace she'd inherited from him. Showing them a way back to what we were meant to be. Protectors, not predators. Guardians, not criminals. Old Chen's voice cut through the tension. Every master must one day face when their student has surpassed them. Not in violence, but in wisdom. Zhang's eyes darted around the diner, seeing not just the obvious threats of federal agents and trained fighters, but the unified resolve of his former subordinates. People who had chosen to stand together against the fear he wielded. It's over, Mei said softly. The ghost hand didn't defeat your organization through violence. She showed people there was another way, and your daughter, your own heir, showed the most courage of all by leading them toward the light. For a moment, the great David Zhang, terror of the Pacific Rim underworld, looked old and uncertain. His gun slowly lowered as the weight of his choices seemed to press down on him. I only wanted to make us strong, he whispered, an echo of the father he had once been before power twisted his path. We are strong, Lei replied, stepping close enough to touch his arm. Strong enough to choose a better way. Strong enough to remember who we were meant to be. The morning sun streamed through Lucky Dragon's windows, illuminating a scene few could have imagined days before. The head of the Jade Phoenix clan standing amidst those who had chosen to break free from his empire of fear. The weapon in his hand seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. A choice lay before him now, as it had lain before his daughter. To cling to power built on fear and violence, or to remember a time when honor had meant more than strength alone. The ghost hand had shown the way, but it was Lei who had proven that even those deepest in shadow could find their path back to light. The dragon stood at a crossroads, and all of Lucky Dragon's gathered souls held their breath to see which path he would choose. Zhang's hand trembled slightly, an empire's weight balanced on his trigger finger. Then slowly, the mighty dragon lowered his weapon. We were different once, he said softly, before power became its own purpose, when protection meant more than profit. Lei moved forward, gently taking the gun from her father's hand. We can be that again, not through fear, but through choice. As Agent Chen moved to secure Zhang, the tension in Lucky Dragon transformed into something else, not quite celebration, but a collective exhale of relief and possibility. Former clan members embraced, some weeping openly, others standing, straighter, as if physical weights had been lifted from their shoulders. You did well, Ghost Hand, old Chen said quietly to Mei. Not through fighting, but through teaching, through showing others their own strength. Mei watched as Lei spoke quietly with her father, while agents prepared to take him into custody. We all have choices, she replied, even those who think they're too far gone to change. Morrison approached, holstering his weapon. The prosecutor's office is willing to work with reformed clan members, especially those who help dismantle the organization's remaining operations. There's a path forward for those who want it. A path that starts here, Agent Chen added, watching the scene unfold. Lucky Dragon isn't just a diner anymore. It's become something more, a symbol of transformation. As if to emphasize her point, a young woman entered hesitantly. Mei recognized her as a clerk from a nearby shop that had long paid protection money to the clan. I heard this is where people come to learn to be strong, she said quietly. Li stepped away from her father, sharing a glance with Mei. Both women recognized their younger selves in the newcomer's hopeful expression. "Welcome to Lucky Dragon," they said in unison, then smiled at the echo of their shared past. The morning sun streamed through the windows as old Chen began preparing tea, his movements carrying decades of wisdom. The diner hummed with new energy, not the tension of conflict, but the vibrant possibilities of redemption. "Every ending is a new beginning," Chen observed, pouring tea for Zhang before the agents led him away. "The question is whether we have the courage to embrace it." Zhang paused at the door, looking back at the diner that had transformed his empire not through force, but through hope. "Take care of them," he said to Lei, a father's love finally breaking through the dragon's scales. "Build something better than I did." As he was led away, Lei turned to Mei, tears and determination mingling in her eyes. "Ready to teach another class, Jieji?" Mei smiled, seeing not just their new student, but the dozens of others who would surely follow. The ghost hand had emerged from hiding not to fight darkness, but to guide others toward light. And in Lucky Dragon, that light would always burn bright, offering hope to all who sought a new path. "Together," she said, embracing her sister in spirit as the morning light painted Seattle's streets with promise. "We build something stronger than fear. We build community." Old Chen nodded approvingly as he began preparing the day's first dumplings. Sometimes the strongest weapons against darkness were not fists or fury, but simple things: a warm meal, an open door, and the courage to choose a better way. Lucky Dragon had become more than a diner, more than a training ground. It had become a beacon, showing that even in the heart of darkness, light could take root and grow. All it needed was people brave enough to nurture it, and a ghost hand to show the way.